Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Great to see everyone. I am super excited about today's Masterclass series. We've got Wada'a here with me, who has got just such an incredible wealth of experience from companies such as Harley-Davidson and Zendesk. And we are going to jump right into this session here, how to build a world-class localization operation. So Wada'a, great to have you here. Be great to, I think lots of folks know you, but for those that don't, it'd be great to give us a quick overview.
Sure. Hi, Brian. Good to see you, and thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Wada'a. I've been in this business for about 20 years now. Spent most of my career on the buyer side of the business, leading localization strategies and operations for iconic brands like Harley-Davidson Motor Company and Zendesk. I founded Locverse Consulting about a year ago, so I transitioned to full-time consulting, and it's been great. I wish I started sooner. And currently, I support both buyers and vendors in their localization journey. Super excited to be here today with Brian and sharing some success stories and some fun stories as well.
Great. Yeah, I think that's it. You know, it was interesting. We just got back. We were in Europe last week. We were in Amsterdam, Stockholm, Berlin, and Barcelona. It's probably met with over 100 companies. And, you know, I tell you what, the messaging was really clear. You know, the number one concern is how do I build credibility with executives? And, you know, so I think this is one of the biggest areas where we can help people. And you've often said localization teams struggle to be seen as being strategic. What in your opinion is actually broken in how localization is positioned today?
Sure. Well, growth is global by default, right? So growth cannot scale without localization. And I think the drawback or the blind spot that most localization managers have is that they position localization as a support function. And when you do that, you cap the business. Localization is not a support function. It's a strategic lever because when you're reactive, growth slows. When you're strategic, expansion accelerates, right? And it really depends on the brand identity. Are you working for a global brand or are you working for an iconic brand going global? Two different things. And the way you present localization in that space varies significantly. So for example, Harley-Davidson Motor Company, iconic brand going global. So the availability of the product is as important as the experience. It's not about landing in a certain market. It's also engaging and connecting with motorcycle enthusiasts. So the first thing I did, for example, at Harley-Davidson was spending time understanding the lay of the land and the various functions and their pain points. And this is something that I've also coached and nurtured my team about throughout my career. When they come to me frustrated and say, well, they don't understand our KPI, they don't understand the value of localization, it's an afterthought, it's always the last step in the life cycle of a project. And my immediate response would be, how much do you understand about their function? How much do you understand about their pain points? So just to give you an example, back in 2015, I was still with Harley-Davidson back then, and I received an email that any localization manager would dread having. 2 dealerships in Quebec were shut down because the law enforcement agency, this is a thing, like there's a police for language in Quebec, walked into a couple of dealerships. They usually target power brands and passion brands because this is where the money is. And they found parts and accessories, helmets, leather jackets, where the labels were completely wrong when it came to localization. So instead of just finding the dealerships, they shut down the dealerships and confiscated the products. I still have photos of this because we had to fly there and we had to tour the dealerships and conduct a scan about what happened there. So in order to resolve this issue, we accelerated the process, we devised a strategy, and we were able to get the dealerships back on track. We paid extra fines, but if you look at the overall experience, the loss of morale of employees and what happened, it took a toll, and the loss of sales most and foremost. So the KPI after this experience, the KPI that we leveraged for the compliance team specifically was no longer accuracy of translation or availability of translation. It's the absence of fine. So sometimes the lack of a pain point or the absence of a problem in a certain market is your KPI right there. So if you go through a full fiscal or calendar year and there was not a single fine in Canada, then you've done a great job as localization because you've done the due diligence, you met the market requirements, and so forth and so on. So again, my point is when trying to present or position localization as a strategic lever in an organization, the focus has to be tied directly to the KPIs of the various functions and their pain points as well. We are blessed in our business to have access to various content around the organization. The lens that you see as a localization leader is not shared across the org. You know what they do, they don't know what you do. And you have access to other success stories that you share with them as well. So you can leverage these success stories to build confidence and rapport. These small wins can help you expand within the organization. Take emails, for example. Let's talk marketing at Zendesk. The KPI for them was email clicks. You click on emails in a certain market across, let's say, 90 markets, and that's your KPI right there. Is that a KPI for Look? It's not. But a lead or a conversion due to an email click is your KPI. And this is the type of KPIs that we leverage to build this kind of relatability with the marketing team. Like, this is how localization helped you unlock revenue in a certain market, because this of an email followed by a lead and by a conversion. So again, we can talk about this topic for hours, Bryan, but these are a couple of stories that come to mind.
No, I love it. This is so great, Wada. You know, there's two things that I'll say to that to follow on. One is governance, right? So you just described, like, if I was the CEO of Harley-Davidson, I would lose my mind, right? Because that must have cost them a significant amount of money. And so there's this, a lot of times people forget, or they say things like, why don't we just use GPT to translate? Like it's magic, right? As all these things. What a lot of times executives forget about is this governance issue, right? So in certain countries, like in Canada, right? So for example, and in Germany and China, for example, lots of countries, around certain topics, right? There's governance, there's laws, there's local laws in place that if you break those laws, if you produce content that violates those laws, there could be very significant financial impacts of that. So I think that missing from this toolbook that we have as localization experts is being able to help our executives understand that governance is a material financial risk to the company. And number two is, I love what you said about the email, right? About emails. Like this concept of delivering on growth goals is really important, right? So like it stands to reason, and this is easy to test, by the way, that an email sent out in English to South Korea is probably not going to have as good an open rate or conversion rate as an email that's sent in Korean, right? So you can measure those things. And one of the pieces of advice that, and following on this, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, is in my conversations with localization professionals, oftentimes they are not business people. And so they tend not to speak in business language with leadership. And that's a big, and I think that's what's causing a bunch of this dissonance, right? And this concern, and well-founded, that as companies are looking to leverage AI and to cut costs and so forth, it's essential that we as localization professionals be viewed as growth centers and not cost centers. In order to do that, you have to speak the language of your business. You have to present your strategic plan in line with the goals or supportive of the business or growth goals of the organization. And I think that's probably the number one piece of advice that I could give is, if you're a localization manager on this podcast right now, and you don't know what your company's growth goals are or KPIs, you're in trouble.
100%.
Right. So, okay. So now you can go off and you can find those goals, and the easiest thing to do is ask, right? So what are our growth goals? And then tip number 2, and this is sort of like this is the point, I'd love to get your opinion on this, is then now, anytime you're describing your localization strategy, it's in support of those goals, right? So if our international growth rate is 20% in these countries, then talk about how localization supports those initiatives. If we need to drive growth, if we need to improve conversion rate, if we need to improve open rate, if we need to improve engagement, et cetera, think about how localization is going to help solve those problems or enable those goals. I guarantee you will get a very different response to that than if you're just simply talking about quality, cost, and speed goals.
Absolutely. And to your point, Brian, if you want to be a leader, you have to speak like a leader. If you want to get executive sponsorship and buy-in, you have to speak the language of your audience. Be curious about their areas. Now, it's not very often that localization managers or leaders get invited to E-staff and C-staff meetings, but it's going to happen at some point, and you have to be ready. And this is not a one-off type of a situation. And that's why localization manager must practice and work internally on facelifting their executive presence, on working on their narrative. This is what I like to call a nurture strategy. What are you doing on a daily basis to develop this confidence and rapport so you are visible around the organization? So when the time comes for you to get in front of the executive leadership to present or talk about localization, they might not be very well versed in your core competency, but they know who you are because you have presented this level of credibility and people are interested in listening to what you have to say. That drives curiosity. Curiosity leads to engagement. Engagement leads to action or buy-in. So this is not a one-off situation. Understanding your stakeholders and speaking their language, it's a nurture strategy that I honestly worked on for years to develop.
That's amazing. Yeah. So my one homework is my tip for this one is go away. If you don't have a strategy document that you put together that ladders up into support of those initiatives, take some time with your team or yourself and do that. And it's a forcing function for yourself. And I am telling you, you're going to get much greater results. I'll also give you a tip from the C-suite as a CEO. So CEOs are terribly fearful that no one's listening to them, right? So we spend all this time and energy working with our boards to create these strategic plans and these goals and so forth. And then we pitch those out, we talk with the team, and we're always worried that like no one's paying attention to them. I'll tell you what, if you come back with a plan that's in alignment with what the CEO is looking for in terms of goals, I guarantee you'll get a much better response, because at least then like, oh great, at least someone in the organization is listening to me. So that's my secret CEO tip. All right. Kind of going back a little bit, we talked a little bit about Harley-Davidson, but Harley-Davidson really is one of the highlights of your career. Maybe give us a little bit more insight. What made that localization challenge unique?
Oh gosh. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we were not working for a global brand. We were working for an American icon going global. So a localization or the brand image was the prestige. The revenue came from the prestige of the brand and its impact overseas. So when I joined the organization, it was a little bit intimidating because it's a Midwest organization, right? So 50% of the revenue came from the US. So it's unlike other companies like Zendesk, for example. We knew that more than 50% of the revenue came from overseas. So we were in a stronger position for localization. But with Harley-Davidson, the brand sold itself. It's a lifestyle. So after spending time running environmental scans and meeting with various functions, I realized that we needed to follow a completely different globalization strategy in terms of how do we build our centers of operations excellence and the process for each content. Because, for example, for compliance, we needed vendors who would be able to scale. Because if you didn't have the owner's manuals and service manuals on time, the bikes won't ship. It's a compliance issue. And that was actually one of the KPIs too, that we tied it directly to product and compliance. If bikes shipped on time, that means localization contributed to it, because literally the deal stopper there was localization. So again, we focused on scaling and due diligence from a compliance and product perspective, and that required a certain type of vendor, not your typical localization vendor. But then when we went to brand, English wasn't even English there. I mean, dress up a dresser, for example. Unlike your motorcycle rider, you wouldn't know what the dresser is. The dresser was the touring bike, and you could dress it up and you could dress it down. So you have to understand the language of the motorcycling industry to begin with, and then find the omni-channel agencies, the niche boutique shops around the globe to localize the brand and make sure that that doesn't just land in a market, but it also anchors. Even our in-country review process was totally different. Rather than hiring agencies, started reaching out to motorcycle bloggers and enthusiasts who blogged about their rides all over the world, and we engaged them in reviewing the content because they were storytellers by nature and they were motorcycle enthusiasts. So again, yeah, Harley was certainly the highlight of my career because I learned that there wasn't a one-size-fits-all type of a solution for localization, and the stakes were quite high because it was a passion brand and an iconic brand. So it was a big logo that was easy to target overseas. So we had to be on top of our game all the time. But simplicity is key too. So I learned at the beginning that if I earn the trust and confidence of the compliance team, this small win is going to lead to a long-term compounding effect. That was my small win there. It was actually a big win because compliance had the biggest budget. But then we moved to tech pubs and moved to brand. And then people started reaching out to us because we developed a strong track record in terms of protecting the brand integrity while navigating linguistic and cultural waters. And it was an amazing ride, really.
Yeah, I love this because, I think, localization often sits in marketing, and I think marketing cares the most about localization in many cases. And I think there's not a single marketer that I've ever met that doesn't care a lot about brand and isn't certainly aspirational. So I always look at the great brands in the world. I love Smartling. Smartling is a great company. I'm super aspirational when it comes to other companies about how they build brands. So as marketers, we're always thinking about building brand, and we know how important it is to driving growth. And we often think about personalization. I talk about this a lot, like in all kinds of marketings, like the holy grail is personalization. We spend an inordinate amount of time, energy, and capital on creating, our ICPs, right? Our personalized pain points, delivering, really targeted messaging to our prospects and to our customers along those lines. So we spend all this time and energy. And then at the end, when companies kind of just go and just have GPT translate it or just don't even translate it at all, it's like, what was the point of investing all that money in personalization when you don't go through the final mile of actually kind of like the ultimate in personalization or caring, which is to put it in your target's home language, right? That always boggles my mind that you would think that it's okay to spend all that time and energy creating this incredibly personalized content and then give it to them in a different language.
So, Bryan, let me ask you this question. When your clients come back to you and say, well, we're going to leverage AI for this, and they do, and they move on with AI, don't they come back regretting the decision? Because personas development varies even within the same vertical.
Yeah, it's funny. So what's happening right now is last year I was freaking out a lot more because we were having a lot of customers that were coming to us and they're saying, hey, you know what? We're just going to use GPT to translate this thing, right? This stuff. And I'm like, wait, but what about governance? What about, centralization? What about your linguistic assets? All these things. We're just going to do it. Okay. And they go away. And we're like, oh my gosh, we're in trouble. Lo and behold, it's been kind of like 6 months later. Guess who's coming back?
Yeah, exactly.
Because all of a sudden, they get out there and they realize that, whoa, this isn't as cheap as I thought. I've lost my brand voice, and I just had like a Harley-Davidson type of explosion, like you just said. Like oh my God, we just got this letter from Canada, or we totally screwed up, and our country manager's complaining, the customers are complaining because they're like, what happened, right? So So I think that these things have a natural course to themselves. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I think we talked about this before, but like the AI is the future of everything, and certainly in translation. However, there's a right way and a wrong way of doing that, right? And about delivering AI translation at scale, but that's also on brand, and to which there's proper governance, which includes not only quality assurance, right, but also literally governance. Like, where's that data going? What LLMs are working on? Do you have the right agreements in place?
Certainly. And I think what people need to understand as well, not just localization managers, but in business in general, that AI accelerates content and opportunity, but it also accelerates risk. And this is the blind spot right there. The faster you hit that market without the right guardrails, you're exposing yourself to higher risk. And the question becomes, can you afford this risk? What's the probability? What's the impact? And I think this is what people fail to see because, they're under the gun with the deadline and they need to achieve faster revenue.
Yeah, this was the number two concern or top of mind thought that came out of Europe last week was the desire to leverage AI in translation, however, with quality assurance and automation. Those were like really that was really because it was on the top of mind. Like they're all thinking about that. How do I? Okay, I'm under a lot of pressure. I know I need to use AI. How do I do this but still deliver quality and have it be automated?
Well, human in the loop is an expression that we hear a lot. And for certain types of content, you can leverage AI. Now, some people on the call or on the webinar might not like what I'm about to say, but for certain type of structured content, AI is working perfectly because you have a strong foundation. And I'm going to give you an example that we experienced firsthand. When AI took the industries by storm, various functions around the organization at Zendesk were scrambling to launch AI use cases and show success. Because the localization team, our team, had a strong foundation with translation memories, glossaries, and neural MT, we were able to make 3-4 mistakes and roll out use cases ahead of anyone else. And we earned the spotlight and an award for this. But that was because we had a strong foundation. And with that, you are able to leverage AI for structured content. The content becomes paint by number, really. You have a strong process right there. AI came to complement the strong foundation that we already have. So yes, we will leverage AI. And we can afford a margin of risk there for published great content. But for marketing, creative, and brand, you need a human in the loop because it all boils down to the customer experience. And as I mentioned earlier, AI accelerates opportunity as much as it accelerates risk. Now, the compliance team can relate to what you say right away. They say, okay, you can include a human in the loop right there. But I think what worked well for me, Bryan, throughout my career is displaying comparisons. People respond to benchmarks and visuals. When you present them with good, better, best scenarios, instead of saying no, they will respond to you right away. So for example, in marketing, I can say, yes, we can throw this off to the wall and leverage AI for this campaign, but here are the risks. Are you able to live with them or not? Or we can do that. It will reduce the initial turnaround time by 50%, but we will need to add a couple of more days to sign off and go live. Otherwise, and that gets really under the skin of your leaders when you throw in a competitor's name. Otherwise, for example, Salesforce is going to beat you to the chase because they have this and this and that. In this way, you come across as a thought leader. You're flexible because you're not saying no. And you're also suggesting providing scenarios, and you come across as well informed because you know what the competition is doing. So there are ways around presenting things to the leadership without directly saying no, no matter how much you are frustrated with the suggestion of leveraging AI.
That's such great advice. That's the I'm just laughing because that's the social clip right there. That little bit. I love that. That's such a great strategy to don't say no. Give people alternatives that they understand and make sure they understand the competitive impact. I think that's exactly right. I saw that at eBay all the time, and we were in a battle with Amazon every day, and we couldn't get behind from a content perspective. I think, as we think about these impacts, right? So it's interesting. I look back at kind of like a little bit of a perspective on 2025. Our AI translation, I think we moved in 2025 from the experimentation to actual production. In fact, point of that is our AI translation business grew over 200% in the year, making us one of the fastest growing translation companies in the world. And so this is now quickly becoming the benchmark. And I think that we are already seeing massive acceleration on that into 2026 by using AI to, if you look at our customers, they tripled the amount of content that they're producing for about 60% less cost per word, 6 times faster on average, delivering same or better quality. Okay. And so that quality assurance, that governance aspect, that and human loop, as you talked about, the analogy I use, it's like software engineers right now. So with products like Claude Code and some things that just happened towards the end of the year, it used to be that engineers were like spending 80% of their time coding and using AI 20% to help do that. With some of the new models that are out, that's like flipped. So in other words, these engineers now are being like 10x more productive using AI as a software engineer. So the analogy to me is that we're now creating translators that are 10x more productive using AI. They're not going away. We've actually hired hundreds of translators in the last year or two because we're teaching them how to use AI and to be super effective and productive. So your point, I think that I see humans in the loop. I see human translators creating enormous value. The job is changing.
Oh, certainly. It's shifting gears, basically. They're moving from heavy lifters to gatekeepers. So instead of doing the entire work, AI is alleviating all the pressure, and the linguists and the subject matter experts are coming in to cross-check and be a gatekeeper and make sure that the content is on brand and it's published grade. And that allows them to take on more projects.
Yes.
So the way I see it in the future is that the rate structure is going to change. The roles are going to change. We're already seeing it. The org charts, the job titles, they're changing significantly. And also, you touched on something earlier, Bryan, that is super important, the benchmarking. Now, and I'm seeing this and I'm trying to advise and provide counsel to my clients to avoid these metrics anymore. We have been leveraging the same numbers for years around LQA 97%, time to market, or reducing cost by 30% using translation memories, reducing cost as well by the same percentage. We no longer can use these metrics. These are now the expectation, not the exception. With AI, these percentages must change. LQA cannot be at 97% anymore. Time to market 30% or cost savings 30%, that is the bare minimum. So my advice to localization managers and sellers and even internal localization managers within an organization, if you want to demonstrate value with AI, you need to change because you can do better now with the various metrics, especially for time to market.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's exactly right. You're known for having run some bold experiments to prove localization's impact, right? So this is part and parcel of this. Can you walk us through one that really changed leadership's perception?
Right. So, I was a little bit unorthodox in my approach when it came to localization, because sometimes we worked by elimination. So we were faced with a situation in Indonesia that was back in 2016, where the leadership was questioning why localization, or how can we determine that localization was adding value to the translation, especially when it came to general merchandising, so leather jackets and all of the nice gear. And my suggestion was with the team was to stop localization for a month for anything related, well, actually for a full quarter, for anything related to Bahasa. And they were like, you're crazy, it's going to backfire badly. And I'm like, that is the only way to showcase how localization is directly contributing and has an impact on sales, not just the CX experience, it's direct impact on sales. And I got the green light from my boss, and he's like, go for it, because that's going to be huge. And that's what we did for a full quarter. We refused to localize. Now, we owned the budget, so we had an advantage. We had an edge in terms of saying yes or no. Otherwise, when the markets pay or cross-charge you or transfer from cost centers, you can't say no. But we owned the budget. And we stopped localization, and sure enough, not only sales dropped, but the customer complaints via the dealer network, because we also worked very closely with the dealers on e-learning and in-person training. The absence of one thing prevailed and revealed the value of localization. And we had a specific percentage there, right there, showing how much it dropped during a model year launch and how much the sales were impacted. So again, not everybody was happy. The market felt that we were letting them down, but they realized afterwards that we were protecting them, and that was the only way to demonstrate the value of localization. Now, I understand not all localization managers have the flexibility or the freedom to be bold and a little bit cavalier, but sometimes you have to.
I love that. I love it. It's like that we talk about that in marketing all the time. It's like, hey, the best way for us to find out whether this ad campaign is working or not working is just turn it off. Let's see what happens, right? You get a really bright signal when that happens. It's I would argue much more powerful than an A/B test or even a pre-post. But if you have the ability to do that, that's a great. You're going to find out real fast. But I also think that A/B tests and pre-post tests are also quite valid too. Got to run them for a period of time, a month, I think at least, and just collect some data. And you'll see. I mean, when I was at eBay, half a bit of conversion rate was like massive. Like we would go after that all day long. And so I think if you ran these types of experiments, turning something off, like turn off a language, and watch what happens to conversion rate or engagement or customer complaints. You're gonna see the impact of that. I almost guarantee. So I think that's super powerful for you. When you think about, so if we're having this conversation, and if someone listening today wants to make immediate progress, what's one or several things that they can do this week?
This week, wow, okay, that is quite aggressive. Well, first, let's say if you're on the buyer side of the business, I'm going to provide two recommendations, whether you're on the buyer side or the vendor side. If you're on the buyer side of the business, I would go back to the drawing board and understand the brand identity. Are you working for a global brand, or are you working for an American icon going global? Because that will impact your entire localization strategy, your entire terminology. And then look at your team. Are you using the same language? Do you have your internal localization brand? Are you consistent with the brand image internally? Are you training? Are you only conducting postmortems, or are you also conducting premortems? So premortem is a concept that I adopted throughout my career, and that had to do with presentation. If we were worried about a certain presentation with the executive leadership, we would practice internally as if it already failed and try to poke holes in it. And we would bring in team members who are known for being naysayers and ask them to provide feedback before we even get in front of the leadership. And we would adjust and pressure test ourselves and practice internally as a team to come across as one front using the same terminology and the same language. As a team, you have to function like a single unit. Working remotely in localization doesn't help because you use the personal elements, but you can build it through training and practicing and leveraging the same language internally. Another tip would be, again, do not have a victim mentality about being the afterthought, people not relating to your KPIs. Are you doing enough work to understand the world around you? The KPIs, the pain points of the functions around you. Are you tying your KPIs to these functions? All of these are important things. Again, I mean, we could spend the whole day talking about this, but if I want to move on to the vendor side of things, time to evolve the RFP process, time to evolve the way we answer questions and the way to respond to RFPs. You have to keep in mind that it's not only you completing an RFP. There are 5 different competitors and they're answering the same questions. And if you're going to not come across as a differentiator and you're going to leverage the same old language about having translators in their country of origin and meeting time to market and beating time to market by 30%, you're not going to cut it. So time to evolve the sales pitch and think about how you're going to differentiate yourself in an AI charged environment. And again, I could spend the whole day giving tips about, but this is what comes to mind because that's what I'm experimenting, working with clients and vendors at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, when I think about, once again, you know, we see, I always say, like, you know, I mean, as a localization manager or any function that you're in within a business, like you kind of like you see the world through your people, like through that you're seeing your organization. One of the benefits of you and with your consulting business, and certainly with us, you know, we see hundreds of global enterprises localizing what's working, what's not working. So we get really good pattern recognition on this. And we talked a little bit earlier about this, you know, I mentioned this, but, you know, when I see stats like I just referred to, like, you know, tripling content being translated, you know, at 60% less cost, 6 times faster, right? You know, that's not 30%. That's like a sea change. So if your competitor is able to do that in their global markets and you're not, that's going to be problematic, I think, for these companies, especially where localization is so important. Do you any other thoughts around, you know, something else that, you know, like if you think about maybe experimentation, so like, let's see. So if I'm thinking about AI, leveraging AI, what's a good word? What's a good way to make immediate progress or to start some experimentation with that?
Well, on the buyer or the vendor side or both?
On the buy side.
Well, if you're on the buyer side, I would focus on integrations because what we've seen, at least during my time at Zendesk, is that AI is also prevalent in marketing, in the MarTech stack, and the e-learning section, and the chatbots, and so forth and so on. So what are we going to do to integrate seamlessly with all of these tools? Because the future is all about seamless integration and automation. Our tools in localization are not a one-stop shop for all types of content. So the working on integrations and engaging upstream in the process with the marketing team and the product team to understand what type of CMS they're leveraging, what type of MarTech stack they're leveraging will help you select your vendors better, or also set up your vendors for success. Because what I've noticed is that most of the buyers, they want a vendor who's, you know, one of the big logos, they can scale, they can support. But when it boils down to integrations after signing this contract, it becomes quite painful because the vendor was not set up for success. They did not have an insider view of the other tools inside this organization that they needed to integrate with. So my recommendation would be understand the tech stack in your organization, because you're going to have to integrate successfully with this tech stack.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's one of the big things that I think that people miss when they're thinking about AI. I mean, it's kind of like I always think about, like, when you're painting. The analogy I use, and maybe it's not a great one, is like if you're painting a house, like, where's the cost? Is the cost in the paint, or is it in the painting, right? And you know, 80% of the cost is in the painting. And I'm always shocked when companies focus so much on, like, hey, how much did that translation cost, right? Well, you're like cutting and pasting and downloading and putting in spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. How much did that cost? You know. So I do agree. And with content tripling, right? So, or I should say, if you look at the volume of content in the world, there's great stats on this. You can look it up. But the amount of content being produced is certainly not declining. I think it's like doubling every couple of years or something like that. So there's more and more content needs to be translated. So in order to do that at scale, the automation and the integration is really paramount. And that's what that's one of our KPIs with our customers is we're targeting 100% automation of translation workflows, because that's where the real cost savings are. So hopefully people have enjoyed this. We've got some I want to kind of like, we've got some Q&A coming up here that I want to get to, but I think just to kind of like summarize some of the things that I've heard from you and in this discussion, right? We talked a little bit about, the amount of content has been accelerating. So the need to automate, the need to use AI just to keep up. It's there. It's like we talked about, our AI translation has grown 200%. We've gone from that. It's no longer sort of experimental. This is full on production at massive scale. Yeah. You got to be there. I think that from a strategy perspective, in order to be relevant, you have to understand what's relevant to the organization and to your C-suite. So making sure that you understand what your corporate goals are, and then adopting those as your own and laddering your strategy into achieving those, I think is a really quick fix and really essential. And I think I love what you said about don't say no. I've heard this a bunch of times. I've heard people say this. I'm like, don't say no. Okay, that's like the last thing you can do, because here's what's going to happen. When you say no to your product team, your engineering team, to your C-suite, they're going to turn away from you, and they're going to look at someone that's going to say yes, and then you're out. Okay.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just seconding. I'm saying absolutely.
Yeah. Don't say no. The thing that people have to understand is there is enormous pressure on CEOs from, I know, cry a river. No, there's enormous amount of pressure on CEOs from their boards and from their investors to not only implement AI, but to show results. So 26 is going to be the year about not just implementing AI, but actually showing those results. So we're seeing rapid acceleration across all functions here. So don't say no, say yes, and this is how I'm doing, and here are the risks, and here are the trade-offs, here are your options. I think that's a really successful strategy. And probably lastly, and most importantly, I think is, I'm not sure if I'm going to say this the right way or the wrong way, but I'm going to say be loud, okay? Be proactive within your organization, with your plan, with your strategy, and how you add value. Do not be reactive. Do not sit back and wait, because bad things come to people who wait in this environment. Would you agree with that?
100%. Actually, you just reminded me of a situation where I think people could benefit from taking initiative as thought leaders. Many of us have a budget towards the end of the quarter that if you don't spend it, you will lose it. Take initiative. Go to your counterpart in marketing and say, hey, I know you have concerns about this market being tier 2 and you think it should be in tier 1. How about we pilot? I have some funds. I'll fund it for you. How about we spend some time piloting this localization so you can demonstrate to the leadership that the conversion rates and the churn rates and all that got much better after we piloted. You'll come across as a strategic thinker, as a thought leader, someone who's taking initiative outside the radius of localization.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if you're not sure exactly how to do that, Wada'a is a great resource. And we've got folks on our team that are happy to help too. Once again, we see, you get a little bit of pattern recognition. We see this across hundreds of organizations all around the world. And so, we can help you sort of have these conversations with leadership. We're more happy to do that because we're all in this together. I want to turn it around, or turn it over here to some questions, some Q&A. I got a question here that I love. I'll give you a chance if you want to answer this question. I'm happy to take a swipe at it too. But one of the questions is, what is meant when individuals say leverage AI for translations? Isn't that what machine translation essentially is?
That's a very good question. It's a machine translation on steroids, really. But I think we need to focus less on the definition and more on the outcome. Okay, so if the question is leverage AI, you can say, yeah, sure. How is AI integrating with your current machine translation? I think I touched on this a little bit earlier in terms of, do you have a strong foundation? Because if you have a strong foundation of TMs and glossaries and machine translation, then AI will accelerate it and amplify it. And the answer should be yes. No need to explain a little bit further, because your stakeholder is not interested in the technical details. But The challenge happens if you are decentralized and fragmented internally and you add an AI layer to it, because
Yeah.
that is also, you accelerate and amplify the failure. So the answer to this, if they ask about the difference between machine translation and AI, you could say, well, machine translation is a little bit more pointed because we spent years developing the same type of terminology. AI accelerates our work, so it adds a layer of acceleration. And things are changing on a quarterly basis. We've effectively moved from soon enough to real time. So there's not enough data to also weigh in on this topic, unfortunately. So we have to literally continue. It's an upskilling and learning experience on a quarterly basis.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's really interesting. I'll put some numbers to that. What we have, because we have these benchmarks, we track these all the time. What we have found is the kind of like the outcome difference between MT and AI translation is that AI translation improves the quality of the translation to the point that that post editing is reduced by about 65% on AI translation versus MT, and that's a combination of using linguistic assets like improving or using adaptive translation memory, glossary, style guide, RAG, retrieval augmented AI technology, and engineering prompts, or prompt engineering. The combination of those things basically gets you a higher quality output that enables you to reduce human editing by about 65%. So that's like kind of like the net of it. So and that number, we're improving that number probably about like 1% or 2% every month. Is acceleration of change. And we like to say that when we saw AI enabled us to solve a whole bunch of linguistic problems that MT just couldn't solve. And so it's really the combination of those two things that really results in that difference, and that's what it's really about. Let's see. Let me see if I can come up with some other questions that we've got here. Let's see. How should teams think about AI adoption without putting quality or brand at risk?
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah. Yes.
So I think AI is upon you. So you're going to have to adopt it whether you like it or not. But it all boils down to how strong your foundation is again. If you have all of the necessary brand guidelines, you can leverage AI to create personas, for example. And you don't have to apply AI in each and every module of the organization. Again, in certain areas, you don't need AI. But for example, for your daily workflow, there's a lot of automation. Then you can alleviate the pressure from your team members and your linguists by applying an AI for automation. In-country review, as Bryan mentioned, is a huge aspect, because especially when it comes to taglines, headlines, and so forth and so on, when you are able to get to the market ahead of time, so they have more time to review, this is the beauty of AI there. Instead of spending the normal 10 business days for translation plus 5 business days for in-country review, you're slashing this by 70% and allowing more time for in-country review. So again, I think you want to think strategically about AI. It's not paint the entire workflow with the same brush. Where does it fit in your full life cycle of a project, and where is it going to be valuable, and go from there? I think there's a misconception about, okay, we're going to add AI to everything that we do. It's not. It's small wins, testing, pressure testing, being happy with the results, and then moving to the next stage.
That's great. We have time. I think we have time we can get a couple more questions in here. I love this one for you. What is one mindset shift that has helped you earn executive sponsorship earlier in your career?
That's a very good question. I think being curious and listening a lot more than speaking. So it's a humbling thing. When you join a power brand or an American icon going global, there's a lot of listening involved. I think we tend to preach and start by educating, and that is not the first step in the process. First, we need to digest and listen. So what earned me executive sponsorship is that I literally spent the first 3 months at Harley quiet, just booking meetings and listening to people and collecting their pain points and collecting their frustrations. And then I decided to focus on one major win. I realized that the compliance team, the CEO used to say compliance is not an option. So I knew that compliance was the number one priority. And we worked with them very closely. When we earned their trust and their respect and devised strategies that aligned with theirs, that was our win. And we leveraged the story to expand within the organization. So our reputation was right there. Um, I would say listening is important, not having a victim mentality, because it's frustrating when you're on the client side. It's you're not in your natural habitat, period. As a vendor, you speak with your colleagues all day about localization, you understand your pain points. When you're on the buyer side, you're on an island. It's not your natural habitat, and you have to prove yourself every single day. It's
Yeah.
lonely there. So the minute you start mastering the language of your audience and showing interest in their pain points and presenting yourself as an ally, you're going to come across as a trustworthy partner. People used to tell me, and I'm fortunate to have recommendations online for this as well. We know she'll get it done. We'll go to Wada'a. We know she'll get it done because there's this level of trust that I'm going to make it happen, not at the expense of something else, but I'm going to have an honest feedback. There's a level of integrity that you need to build in that business to be able to earn executive sponsorship and rapport.
Yeah, I love that, Wada. Not having a victim's mindset is such a great piece of advice. By the way, and it's total human nature, right? Something doesn't go wrong, right, or something like that. And you kind of like, well, blah blah blah. That's like that might be. I think that's a lot of people. That's a natural instinct, but man, is it the wrong one? And people, in order to lead and to evolve, like, they're looking for someone that's going to get it done and it's going to put it on their shoulders, and take that action to get it done, and not play the victim. So I just think that's great career advice. It's kind of like a follow-up question to that is, what's one moment that you realized that your localization narrative wasn't landing, and what did you change?
Oh gosh, we've had many of those. You literally, take all of these bricks that were thrown at you and build this foundation today, that we have today. But sometimes you enter a room and there are people who are determined that it's not going to work. And it happens in corporate America because there's a sense of losing control. So when you come to your team members or your counterparts in the regions and say, hey, we're going to centralize. And obviously you don't say it point blank, but the intent of this presentation is to centralize, and because we're going to be able to achieve amazing cost and time savings. But you're eventually telling them that I'm going to eliminate all of your vendors and you're going to have to work with my vendor because we're centralizing. So people would walk into that room determined that they're not going to be working with you. And I think you have to know when to stop. Oftentimes during presentations, I realized that we're not going anywhere. So I stopped fighting it. I table it. I try to reframe, because, how do you reframe? Like 80% fat or 20% fat free. Sometimes reframing helps. If reframing doesn't help, I ask to put a pin in it and come back to you later, because I need the temperature to go down. And sometimes I reverse it. Like, what would you do in that situation? If they're going to say we're going to keep our mom and pop shop and cost the brand integrity, then the entire audience is going to be listening to that. So it depends on really the situation they're in. But I think the key priority is to know when to stop and not push the limits and the boundaries, when to step back and revisit.
Yeah, that's amazing, Wada. This has been so inspirational for me. I've learned a lot. I appreciate everything that you said here today. It's really, really, truly great information for anyone that's dealing with these really challenging times that we're in, and thinking about how to grow and accelerate their career in 2026 and beyond. In fact, we have, if you're interested, and this is a plug, we've got, if you're interested in to do a more deeper dive into how you can plan for productive and successful 26 and beyond, we're actually hosting a series of hands-on workshops across the U.S. in March. So if you're interested in learning more, or you want to drop in a request for us to come to a city near you, please fill out the form. We'll drop that into the comments, and we'd love to see you in person. These are really wonderful events. We do these 3-hour workshops where you get to meet all of the other localization professionals in your area, in your city, and we're going through exactly these kinds of things in live and in person. So then we follow up and have a really fun dinner. So we'd love to have you there if you're interested. Wada'a, thank you so much for sharing this incredible wisdom with us. I think everyone enjoyed it and everyone got a lot of it. So thanks everyone out there for taking the time to visit with us from around the world. I really enjoyed today. Thank you, Wada'a.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, everyone. Take care.